And now to our next talk. It will be performed in a duet, and it comes from a world of urban mobility. Now, Kristina, Tehova, and Veselina Belobradova are product designers at ModeShift and are both obsessed with how people move through cities and how technology can support that. They will take us beyond screens into buses, public transport stops, and city streets to show us how invisible design decisions in public transportation shape our daily routines and how good UX can make cities feel simpler, safer, and closer to humans. As a transport planner myself, I cannot wait to hear more. Ladies, the stage is yours.
Hi everyone, I'm Chrissy.
And I'm Vesi.
And today we're going to talk about the invisible city in both digital systems and city spaces. So let me tell you a bit about us and why we've chosen this topic. Before I became a product designer, I worked as an architect for a few years. Back then, I believed that design is something that needs to be noticed and admired. But now, as a product designer, I know that often the best design isn't visible at all. It took me time to get that design lives in the background. But still, architecture and design have a lot in common. Maybe that's why I let my grandma still believes I'm an architect. Yeah, because it's easier to say, yes, grandma, buildings are going great, instead of explaining what UX design actually is to her. But still, I believe that my grandma isn't wrong. Because in the end of the day, both architects and designers shape how people experience the world around them. So now let me tell you a bit about ModeShift and our work there. So ModeShift is a public transport system that serves transport agencies and riders in different cities. So often it feels like we work for 7 different products. Because, as you can see here, we have 7 modules. And each of these modules is with different interface and is for different users. For example, the back office is for our operators, dispatchers, resellers of the tickets. So a lot of complex management of tasks. We have mobile app for riders, as well as ticket machines on the streets for riders. In the bus, we have validators, driver's tablet, and yeah, it can be even way more complicated. But I'm not here now to explain all these connections. What we want is our users never to feel the complexity of our system. And that's why we want our riders, dispatchers, drivers, and everyone involved just to interact with our system with ease. That's why we always ask ourselves this question: how to make our system feel simple? Because it is not, obviously. But this question matters for every design system ever. Let's take the city, for example. It can be a total chaos in the city. A lot of lights, streets, people, cars, details in every different building. Yes, but urban planners are trying to put all that chaos into an order with this organized system, with street network, balance between public spaces, residential spaces, and some green areas. Yes, but still, how do we navigate as human beings in this complex system? Our brains are wired to simplify. We follow patterns, not details. What guides us are subtle clues, like shapes, colors, simple design decisions that lead us forward. So, like breadcrumbs scattered through the city, kind of like Hansel and Gretel, with each design decision, we decide whether those breadcrumbs are gonna guide the people forward to the safe place or just leave them lost. So the same exact principle of turning complexity into clarity was used for the most revolutionary design decision in public transport. As you can see here, this is the London Underground map from 1933, and it follows every single twist and turn of the lines. Accurate, yes, but nearly impossible to use. Then along came Harry Beck, an engineer who looked at it differently. He drew the map with straight lines, bright colors, and simple connections. They no longer followed the real geography, and it was so revolutionary it took a little time and iteration to be accepted. But once people used that map, it made their journeys way more simple. So, what's the lesson here? Good design isn't about showing all details. It's about aligning with how humans think and move, turning chaos into something that feels clear, natural, and effortless to use.
And of course, this lesson doesn't only apply to cities and maps. So let's look at one of our own examples. As we already mentioned, we have a mobile app that's used by riders. And it's pretty simple. It does two main things. It lets riders buy and validate tickets and also check public transport nearby. So, when it comes to checking nearby transport, or that means looking for a line or a stop, there are two main ways you can do that. One is by directly searching the line or stop. You just type it and we show you all the details. And the other one is through this screen right here. It's what we call the Explore screen, and it's used to show you all nearby transport. So what you're seeing here is a list of lines, and each line is its own carousel. And for example, if I swipe through the carousel of line 7, I will see that it's heading towards different directions and it serves different stops and so on. So these two screens are meant to complement each other because they serve slightly different purposes. Search is meant for planning ahead. It's when you're not near the stop, while Explore is when you're right there or you're on the go. But in reality, the usage was far from balanced because the analytics showed us that people had a clear preference for the search screen. And for us, that was a red flag because Explore is meant to make public transport effortless. And if people were not using it, that meant something was off. So we blamed the visual design, specifically those carousels. So as true designers, we rolled up our sleeves and started redesigning. And here's what we tried. We explored different ways people think and what they look for when they open the app. What's the first thing they look for? Is it a stop? Is it a line? And that's why during our first iteration, we tried organizing the screen by stops. So first, here you have the stop, and underneath you have the lines that serve that stop and their arrival times. But we also tried to keep the line-first approach, just like in our current design. Here, however, here we replaced the carousel with a clean list view. That was the main change. But again, under the line, you have the direction is heading and also the stops. And then we asked a few people to try and navigate through the screens to see if it works. And, well, nothing. We hit a dead end. Honestly, we thought that people would be super confused with our current design and they would love one of our new versions. But in reality, everyone moved with ease through all the tasks that we asked them to do. And at the end, nothing stood out as especially good or bad, so the confused ones were actually us. And we had analyzed so far every possible interaction, every possible flow, and we were stuck. We were getting nowhere. So we decided to try something new, and we stepped away from our desks and decided to try the app in the real city, away from the screens. So when we did that, it finally became clear. When we were out there standing at the stop, this screen suddenly felt very confusing. We were trying to find a specific bus and without any success. Because look at all these lines. Some of the ones we were seeing were not passing even nearby us. And also, we could swipe a lot through these carousels because they have a lot of items in them, as the app is showing vehicles that are scheduled far later in the day. And here are the two main problems that we identified. One is that the nearby radius, that's basically how far from your current location the app looks for stops and buses, it was set way too wide. And that meant you were seeing too many stops all at once. And the other problem was that we were showing vehicles long before someone would actually need them, scheduled for much later in the day. So these two problems created a lot of irrelevant information and just noise, so you weren't able to actually find what you were looking for. And what was our solution? It's just better filtering. First, we are narrowing down these stop radius to show truly nearby stops and transport, and also we are showing only vehicles that are actually arriving soon. And this is the difference. Before, you saw this long list of lines and all this information, and now you're seeing just the one that matters. And we are still in the process of implementing this, so we will let you know if it worked.
Next year.
In the meantime, could the interface still be improved? Well, yes, of course. But this wasn't the biggest pain point, and that's where we should focus our efforts. And that's how we simplify by thinking of the human flow.
Great, so till now, we simplified the complexity in both digital systems and city spaces by following the human mental model. Okay, but this is only one part of our story, because what do you think happens when designers just can't predict every situation, and design often becomes visible in the wrong way? Well, designer Irene Au once said, "Good design is like a refrigerator. When it works, no one notices. But when it doesn't, it sure stinks." Well, that quote isn't exactly famous in the architecture world because, you know, architects want their buildings to be great, photographed. Well, yes, but it wouldn't hurt if a few of the architects had that quote stuck on their fridge. I'll show you why. This is the law faculty at the University of Girona, designed by RCR Architects, a studio I totally adore. During my Erasmus in Spain, I found their office. I wanted to meet them, with no success, but that's why I put this example here. So, back to the building. you see this building is all from natural stone, a true masterpiece for its time from the late 90s. What do you think it can be the stinking refrigerator here? Well, I'll tell you. The spaces between each step were designed with a slight slope and combined with this natural stone material right in the entrance and staircase. Well, it became incredibly slippery. So every time it rained, it turned into a skating rink. Students were slipping, breaking ankles, and fittingly enough for a low faculty, someone finally sued. So if it was an app, I would just remove this slipping material with a non-slippery one and remove that slight slope between each step. But it would be really expensive for a building. So what they did is to put that huge metal railing right in the middle of the entrance and staircase. Great. That's how they fixed their refrigerator. Bad news for architects, they just can't release a new version of their buildings. But we as product designers, we can. We can test, learn, iterate in real time. So the only thing we need is good data, feedback, and a bit of iteration.
So now let's see how we fixed our stinking refrigerator. And to do so, let's hop on one of our buses and see what's going on there. So our drivers use tablets like this one. They're fixed somewhere in the bus, and they're used for selling tickets. People usually pay by cash or by bank card on these devices, but we have a client that wanted to let riders pay by new payment method. That's what we call an e-wallet. And how does this work? Well, you first load money in your transport card, and then when you tap it, we deduct the ticket price from your card automatically. So, what we had to do. We already had this payment switch component in our system, and we just added this new option to be able to pay by e-wallet. And how is this supposed to work? When the rider gets on the bus and wants to pay by e-wallet, first the driver has to select the correct payment method and then just taps the rider's card right there in the bottom corner. And if the rider is using the mobile app, there's a QR code there to be scanned. So when we were designing this, our focus was mainly on guiding the driver where to tap the card or how to scan the QR, and not so much on this payment switch component, because we didn't think anything could go wrong there. But that's exactly where our refrigerator started to stink. And I'll tell you what happened. The client came to us and told us something's wrong. We are selling tickets, but we are not collecting any money. So what that meant was free tickets. And you may think now that's great for the riders, but it's not so good for the transport agency, so we had to fix it. But first, let me tell you what happened, what was actually happening, where the problem was. Again, back to that payment switch component. As you can see, by default, the selected payment method was cash. And the driver is supposed to change that when someone wants to pay by e-wallet. But guess what? He didn't. So what happened next? The rider gets on the bus, the driver takes the card and taps it. And boom, purchase successful. What do you think happened? If you ask the driver, the sale went through, money was withdrawn from the person's account, and everything is fine. But then where's the catch? Let's go back and see. The tap actually never happened. Instead, the driver accidentally touched this big blue button with this part of his hand, and this completed the sale, but it recorded a cash sale. And there was no card tap, there was no cash or any money paid, just a cash sale recorded and a ticket sold, but for free. So what do you do when this happens? Well, we simply switch the places of the two payment methods. Because now when e-wallet is selected, you don't have that button, because to finalize the sale, you must have a successful tap or scan. And yes, this was a very small fix, but it solved a big problem. And that's how we stopped selling free tickets for the riders, but also that's how we fixed our refrigerator. So you see, the solution isn't always something shiny or groundbreaking. And as designers, we often tend to focus on pixels and layouts and our clever ideas. But cities remind us that design has always been about the way people experience the world. And our real job is to make these human flows easier, sometimes through decisions that go beyond design, like understanding systems or data, and sometimes through the lessons that we learn from our own mistakes. And maybe the best compliment a designer can ever get is when people don't notice the design at all, only the freedom it gives them. Thank you.
Thank you.